to invite everyone, if you're feeling up to it, to move closer to our table. Even though we don't have a physical table, our table is just like the space that we have amongst one another. So if you all would like to participate, feel free to come up forward, because while this is a panel discussion, we definitely feel like this is a discussion amongst all of us, and so this is also an opportunity for us to learn as much as it is for us to share. So, my mother would be like, if you have somebody over your house for dinner and somebody's at your house and you cook it and you not offer anything, you will feel the wrath of Sharon Drakeford, and I do not want to feel any of that today.
I'm posting this on Culture
Thank you for saying that.
So come on up and join us. Come on up and join us. It's a dinner table conversation, so we want to invite you all into our dinner table
And we're all
and our
family.
experience, right? And like Kyle said, we are all family. So we got a couple people walking in, and then we can get started, Britt. Yeah, sure.
All right, so I just wanted to share the ground of what we wanted to accomplish today. Is that what I'm supposed to be doing? Okay.
Sure.
All right, so today one of the things that we really wanted to make sure happens today, and that we wanted to do, is to provide everyone with our family of kinship, or our story of kinship rather, and how our story of kinship has allowed us to, we think, do some pretty cool things in our local community. And how other people can also borrow some of the strategies that we've been using. And I'm certain some of the things that you all are probably doing in your local communities and with your family, to also do some more cool things in your communities around community building, around space, and around preserving history. And for us, preserving our history comes a lot through food, it comes a lot through storytelling, and it really has come through us sitting around a dinner table together and having conversations with one another. So to introduce myself, my name is Brittany Drakeford. I'm the daughter of Calvin and Sharon Drakeford, and the great-great-great-granddaughter of Robert Herrod Sr. I am also a culture of health leader with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and a 2019 Bill Anderson Fund Fellow.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kyle Reeder, son of Oliver Reeder, commonly known as Brother, and Jackie Reeder, grandson of Marion Reeder, and nephew of Sharon Drakeford and Calvin Drakeford.
So good afternoon. My name is Ashley Drakeford. I am the daughter of Calvin and Sharon Drakeford, sister to Brittany, cousin to Kyle. As you guys can kind of see the familial connections. Along with Kyle and Brittany, I work as an organizer and manager of the Capital Market, which is a farmer's market that we were able to kind of start up and head up in actually our local community, in an area where that's considered a food desert. So just a brief history on it. The Capital Market is in the Capitol Heights area, suburb right outside of Washington, D.C., and this community lost their grocery store, I would say 3 years ago. And so we were able to bring a farmer's market that not only provides fresh fruits and vegetables to the community members, but also helps the economic cycle of minorities as we use minority farmers to kind of supply our market. So that's a brief introduction, and I just kind of wanted to set the expectation. I know Brittany talked about some of our goals in this talk, but we're being very poised, and we're presenting our professional selves. But at our dinner table, it really is a family conversation, and everybody is a part of it. And if you're not a part, our house gets really loud. Everybody knows when they come into the Drakeford house, it's loud. So we invite you guys to kind of share, jump in wherever you feel like you need to, ask questions, tell us your thoughts. It's a panel discussion, but we really want to make it a discussion amongst all of us about, like Brittany said, how we can use our dinner tables, whatever that means to you guys, in a sense to kind of push forward whatever it is that you have in your family as an agenda to go forth and do.
And if you all don't mind, I would like to start us off with grace, as we do in most of our family dinners. I don't know if anybody is practicing, but if you all can bow your heads or be quiet or a moment of silence. For what we are about to receive, let us truly be thankful to those who planted the crops, to those who cultivated the fields, to those who gathered the harvest. For what we are about to receive, let us truly be thankful to those who prepared it and to those who served it. Amen.
Amen.
So I will kick it off. And is it okay if I stand up, y'all?
Wait,
Okay.
where are you kicking off with?
I'm kicking off about our family history.
Oh, so you're switching it up on us.
No. Oh,
And
no,
this is
you
how it
okay.
goes down at our dinner
Okay,
table.
all right.
too,
So you can talk about. Okay, I'm sorry.
So before Brittany kicks it off, we really wanted to get other people's ideas. So you guys just chime in if you feel like, what is kinship? Like, what does kinship mean to you all when you think of that word?
I think of our culture of health leaders takes us all over the country. And when we were in Seattle, one of my cousins, I have 29 second cousins.
Oh wow.
And so one of my cousins called my grandfather, and my grandfather told this cousin lives here in Durham.
Okay.
Well, Bettina's in Seattle. And so my cousin said, well, Erica's in Seattle. So she called Erica. And so my grandfather called and said, well, Erica's in Seattle. And then my mom called, and all these people got involved
Right.
with whether or not Erica and I could get together.
Yeah.
So she was there for a meeting, and then our cultural health leader, sometimes there's time, and sometimes there isn't a lot of free time, and I go to bed at a certain time.
Right.
And so everybody was involved with whether or not Erica and I got together. And so we got together in Seattle.
Right.
And then when I came here, then I went over to the same cousin who called my grandfather, went over to her house on a weeknight, and her daughter cooked, and all the little cousins. And they know who I am.
Right,
You know,
right.
we know who each other is, but if we're in the same city, then like it's, I mean, if you don't see each other,
Right. Right.
then, you know, a whole bunch of people get involved. And there are seven sisters and two brothers, and half of the group is deceased now. But we as cousins, so there are about 90 of us, still try to see each other. So whether it's in Birmingham, I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. So whether or not it's in Birmingham or wherever we are, then we have to get
Right.
together.
Yeah, so it sounds like what you're saying is that for you, kinship is like a vast network, right? And it sounds like your grandfather is at the middle. He's the point. He's the connecting point to that network that you have. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else, like kinship? What does kinship mean to you? Any definitions?
Yeah, I think for me, I guess it's a term I heard once. I think they call it rootedness. You know, and for me, rootedness was a sense of place. And so I always told folk I'm usually at my best when I go home. My family is from about 30 miles down the road. And so I said, the world just changes the minute I cross the county line, you know, and the whole world just seems to calm down and slow down. And then the minute I get there, you know, I got four other sisters and three other brothers and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cousins. And so, you know, so that sense of rootedness and place just kind of takes me to a wonderful place in the world.
Yeah, I like that definition of like a sense of home and rootedness, and that like where we can be like our best selves. Because a lot of times, you know, at work or wherever it might be, you know, that W.E.B. Du Bois idea of double consciousness, you know. So when I'm with my family, I know I can be my best self, even if that means, you know, I might not be acting like my best self at the time, right? So thank you. Anybody else want to share what their, sure.
I was had the opportunity to think about this experience at lunchtime, so it's kind of still fresh, and I'll share it. When I think of family really getting together, really like, you know, lots of people that you don't live in the same household with, it's typically on Sundays at church. And you go from church to somebody's house and whatever. And for me, I grew up thinking that was always Sunday was family time.
Yeah.
And in 1990, I made a sojourn to the Midwest to see cousins that some I had never met, some I had not seen in 30 years. And I went because the ones that I had not seen in 30 years were getting older. And I didn't think they would be there 30 more years for sure.
Yeah.
And I would never get a chance to see them. So when I got to Ohio, I had a cousin that was 95 and she was wearing 2 hearing aids. And I called her and told her I was coming, and I was kind of thinking maybe I shouldn't have said I was coming because I'm probably going to have to shout at her to make her hear me for everything that I need to say to her. And when I got there, checked in and called her that I was in, told her I was in Cleveland, she said, tomorrow I'm going to send the gals around to pick you up, and they're going to bring you here for lunch. And I was so surprised to find her vitality and her vibrance to be what it was. Her dress was probably unbuttoned to her sternum and split on each side to her thigh. And she had on long dangling gold earrings and lots of chains around her neck, and she had been married 3 times. And she had gotten up at 5 o'clock to prepare a meal for me.
Oh, wow.
That was cooked from scratch. And it was the chicken, the jello salad on the lettuce leaf with the mayo dollop on it and all of that. And then we got a chance to talk, and she shared a lot of things about my family I would never have known had I not gone there. And I went from Cleveland to Chicago and to see a cousin who was 81 at the time. And she was legally blind, and she said she had not baked a cake in 8 years, but when she heard I was coming, she baked a pound cake from scratch that nobody could touch until I got there to cut the first slice. And while I was there, rather than it being a Sunday gathering, these affairs were taking place in the middle of the week. But in Chicago, the cousins that I met there, they don't gather on Sunday. Wednesday is their family gathering day. So whatever you do on Wednesday after work, you hustle to so-and-so's house, and they're going to have this dinner. And I was so taken by what I saw. I just thought, Wednesday is work day. It's going to be whatever you could pull together. The cousin had barbecued, had smoked a turkey on the grill all night. She had ham. She had a 4-layer chocolate cake, and she had potato salad and green beans and all the liquor that you wanted to take. And, it was truly a day of just fellowship. And there again, I was surprised to meet these cousins that I didn't know I had, and they didn't know that I existed. But what they had to share was this gift that they gave me about family and connectedness that has really brought my picture of what my family is and where we come from. Because these were all Southern folk that went everywhere in the Midwest, but they tended to settle in Chicago, a lot of them. So the whole thing is food. That if you're going together, it might be during the week when you're working, you may have very little, but somehow when it's that family that you're going to pull together the best that you have, and your body will be well fed that day, and your spirit will be well fed that day. And when you go away, you take something from that is so lasting that you truly have a different, at least I did, I had a truly different perception about what family gatherings are all about, what you should do in preparing. You prepare to give the very best that you have. Because believe it or not, some of the people you gather with you may never see again. But what you take away from it will feed your soul for such a long time after that. So that's the kinship and the dining and what I strive for when I gather with people.
Thank you so much for sharing. That was awesome. I think it kind of like tied in all of our ideas, and I think it even links to some of the things that we're going to talk about later on too. So for this portion, I would like to kind of let Brittany take over. She's our family historian in a sense. So she's going to kind of take you through the history of our family.
So, and I'll stand up. Well, I'll stand up for this portion only because sometimes I like standing.
Okay.
Even though normally then I guess I would sit down. But so we actually wanted to create some posters. So even though we didn't have AV or like a projector, we wanted to be able to bring you inside of our family and what that looks like. And so we're, we all said we are all the descendants of Robert Herod Sr. Robert Herod Sr. was born just before the Civil War in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is actually where we all live today. I actually still live in the same district that he lived in, which was the same district that his son lived in, his son, his daughter, my mother. So for us, talking about the concept of rootedness and home, for us and for me, that really is Prince George's County, Maryland. And so Robert Herod Sr. owned about 7 to 10 acres of land in Prince George's County. He was a sharecropper at one point. Now the land is gone, but that's a whole nother story for a whole nother conversation. about why Black people have lost their farmland. But what we were able to discover, and some of the things that I've been able to discover about our family and how it connects to the present, is this nature of activism that was already rooted in them. So Robert Herard Sr., after he acquired this land, he ended up subdividing that land and deeded that land to his children. And so one that shows this idea of hope and aspiration. The fact that he acquired some type of property and he wanted to be able to share that with his children shows this idea of, and really for me, displays this idea of like Black futurism. So how can you have Black people if you don't have a place for them to live? And a part of that is not just the land in which they live, but that's the house, that's the social community, that's providing them with the opportunity to be able to continue a family, to continue a legacy. So that's the first thing. Then, so we have some posters back here. So then, so Robert Herard Sr. has a son named Robert Herard Jr.
They're the same over there too.
Oh yeah, these are the same posters. So Robert Herard Jr., he was married to Eliza Queen, and Robert Herard Jr. actually served as a trustee at one of the Rosenwald Schools in Prince George's County, which was the Highland Park Rosenwald School. One of the reasons why I know this is because I used to work for our Black History program in the county. And so for me, a lot of my professional and academic research has been focused on how do I learn more about my family and how am I then able to translate that past knowledge into action today. So a Rosenwald School. And Rosenwald Schools were a really big deal because that was a way that individual African Americans were able to pull their resources together with a very, very, very small stipend from Julia's Rosenwald Fund to be able to provide their children with an education or opportunity for education and advanced education. Then we had my grandmother, who would have been Robert Herard Jr.'s granddaughter. She attended the Ridgley Church, which is the National Historic Trust, which is the National Historic Trust site. So it's actually on the National Register of Historic Sites in the United States. It was a historic African American church that was formed by slaves. And she worked and she was very active in that church. That's actually the congregation that I'm still a part of today, and that Kyle was also a part of at Canterbury United Methodist Church. But from there, her great-grandfather and her father served as trustees at the local church. They worked, and they really instilled this idea of activism into the local community. But because at that time, the local community was family. And so for us, when I look at our family and I do like a observation, our work has really been rooted in this idea of how do we enhance the lives of our family, but then also seeing our family as other people in our community as well.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. So now that we kind of have given you like our background and history about our family, we kind of want to set the scene or talk a little bit about like how that's translated at the dinner table. So I'd be curious to hear like, and you just shared somewhat like dinner table, Sunday dinners. You grew up in the South and it was always on Sunday and you kind of go from house to house, and when you went to the Midwest it was kind of on Wednesdays. So I would be interested to hear other people's stories around like the dinner table, like whether it's a funny moment or what you remember or what stands out, even if it wasn't necessarily the dinner table. Some people sat at the counter. I'd be interested to hear some of everybody's stories about the dinner table.
Well, I can go first. So at our dinner table, as Ashley mentioned earlier, we were a pretty loud group of folks, loud Black folks, and very opinionated too. So you can imagine the arguments and debates that may have taken place. But I just know, I remember growing up and going over Ashley and Brittany's house and being young, and then just the first thing you do when you walk in the door, just smell the food cooking, right? Because most of the time we ate dinner on Sundays, and so it's after church, or probably in my church clothes, probably a little scuffled up after running around after church. But my parents made it a point to drag my sister and I to my aunt's house so that we could have these moments together. And so you walk in the house, you're smelling food. Most likely, if it's not an argument already happening, the readers, which is my family, was going to bring the argument. And so we walk into the kitchen, and how the Drakeford's house was, the kitchen and the table was right next to each other. So it's like a bunch of folks and congregated around the food, conversation happening most of the time. about politics, about sports, about different socioeconomic issues that may have popped up at the moment. And I don't know, as a kid, I didn't participate as much. It was a lot of listening and taking it all in, developing my own opinions and thoughts about the different scenarios. But as I got older, my family encouraged me to participate. And one distinct thing I kind of remember about that, and it helped me become the man who I am today, is that the men in my family always gave way to the women in terms of like feminine. I didn't have a word for it when I was a kid, but it was essentially this idea of feminism, right? That we weren't necessarily patriarchy or matriarchy, but it's the idea that we had very opinionated women, and the men in my family embraced that. They sought to the women in my family for counsel, and you just saw it in the dynamics of the arguments around the table, right? Because my Aunt Sharon could shut down my dad real quick with some words, and everybody was open, and sometimes feelings were hurt, but we ultimately walked away from the table a lot more better and a lot more closer. And so, anybody else experiences?
Yeah, so I can share. My immediate family is pretty small. I'm an only child, but I have a lot of memories of being at my grandma's house with my extended family, and we also like to argue. And so her kitchen is pretty small, and so we have like a bigger table that seats maybe 6 people, and then a smaller one that seats 4. And then we always still need to bring in some more chairs for other people. So talking about like just different social issues, but we also talk about like movies, and so that's kind of our way to like share movies, but like art, whatever we've been kind of experiencing throughout the year that we haven't caught up with, we'll kind of share that with each other. And it's also this space too that's kind of performative. So when I was younger, myself and one of my cousins, we used to have this like variety show in the dining room. So it was like we would eat there and we would like sell my family tickets, and then everyone would leave, come back at like 7 o'clock when like the show's starting. And so we would do kind of like skits, tell jokes, make up, music and things like that. And like my younger cousins are now like kind of carrying that tradition forward. So it's communal in the way that we're like talking and expressing, and also bringing in that art component as well.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you for sharing. And then in the back, yes, ma'am. Hey, can you guys hear me? I can hear you.
Hey, or I can stand. I'm really loud. So family dinners. So growing up, well, first I have a really big family, right? Between my immediate family and my extended family, we're huge. And so growing up, dinners were centered around like holidays. That's where everyone would get together and just have like this big, huge family event. I can remember my papa making homemade ice cream and banana pudding, like all these things. The men in my family cook. That's a tradition. All these things that really just brought us together during the holidays, and it would literally be a whole day event, where we get there at noon, maybe eat around 2, ha, he, eat again, everyone's loud, we're playing games, we're watching TV, it's a big ordeal. My parents, so that's when I was younger, my parents moved us to North Carolina. I'm originally from Michigan, and so we were kind of forced, it just became my immediate family, I guess, during dinner time. They're not as fun, versus the big, huge family that lived in Michigan. So it's been amazing to kind of see how our immediate family dinner tradition has changed over the years and evolved over the years, because we've all grown up, we've started our own families, and so we're kind of creating this big family that we have. I was about to say we still have the people in Michigan, but we just don't see them as frequently as we want. But yeah, and it also puts me in the mind of kinship, just that family that's connected, family ties, people that are close to you, people that you can connect with. As my grandmother would say, your kinfolk. Right. The people that I relate most to because they are attached to me by blood. Yeah. And I think it's important within the Black community that we understand our kinship, we understand who those people are. Like, I have 1,000 cousins, I'm sure, that I don't even know, you know, from different branches of my family, and so that's all I have to say.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you.
I like that.
No, I was gonna say, so that's a really, the thousands of cousins that you just don't know. So because we all lived in the same area, we actually all grew up. So Kyle, we probably lived 5 minutes away from him. Then we lived about 5 minutes away from my grandmother, 5 minutes away from another grandmother. So all of us, so there was one point in time where I might have had it might have been 1, 2, 3, or 4 of my grandmother's grandchildren who actually attended the same school at the same time. And then when I went to high school, there ended up being a time when I was meeting people, and I was just finding out at high school that there were other cousins who I was like, who were in the same high school. Oh, this is your cousin in your class. So I completely relate with that experience there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just gonna say, I like the point that you mentioned in that, like, you're starting now to create your own family traditions. I almost would, I would ask, like, how do you make sure that you continue some of those other family, like those old traditions, and pass them down to like the next generation that may be missing out on that? Like, how do you create a new tradition but still make sure that you're holding on to, you know, the old traditions and things like that?
Oh, here, whatever.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So, again, I talked about my papa's homemade ice cream and his banana pudding. Those are recipes that are on little broken cards in my mother's cabinet that we pull out during the holidays, and we recreate the things that he did. You know, game night. You know, again, during the holidays, we would play games. That's something that we recreate now with all the kids during these big, huge dinner events. And so it's just because I believe we're all only a product of our environment, and so those things that are instilled in you, they will come out naturally. And I don't even know that you have to really write a book about it and pass the book along to your family members, but rather what's in you will come out. And so if you're raised that way, I think by default you will kind of pass that information along, but it's probably a more formal way to do that also.
Yeah, no, I like that idea of what's in you will come out, and I think that maybe kind of directly correlates to some of the activism and things like that we went into. Was there anybody else that wanted to share their dinner table experience?
This is not a dinner table experience,
Okay.
because it's just, the dinner table is too small for the size of our family.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking all the time that I finally made it to the adult table, then I had a child late. I had a child at, I was almost 40, and I ended up back at the children's table,
Hey.
so that came up for me. But we had, since you did African American Studies, we have age sets, because there's so many of us. And so when I say my second cousins, like I didn't have, me and my brother were the only great grandkids at one point.
Right.
And so about 10 to 15 of my second cousins are within a 4 to 5 year range of my age group. And so when we had family reunions or we had major functions, we may have had a separate space for our age, the next generation, and we may have been in an entirely separate house.
Right.
And so we called them cousin parties.
Okay.
And so one of my cousins, who's only a year older than me, now as 50-somethings, he'll say, hey, okay, whose house is next, and having a cousin party, and who's planning it. And so the cousins that live outside of Birmingham want to know in time so they can fly in or drive in.
Right.
Or whatever, but it's that big. And then my son's age group, one of my cousins has started trying to get all the little kids together, because they didn't grow up with, my mother and her age group, all the parties and all that, because they're all aging, need replacements or whatever.
Right.
They're doing it at this point in time. But trying to, keep the cousin parties going, or iterations. And now my cousins, the female cousins only, go on a trip every other year.
Yeah. Oh, we do. We actually have what we call a cousins trip. And so it started, and the idea of the dinner table, like, it could be anything. Like, it doesn't have to be a dinner table, right? But that somewhere, some sacred space or time that you put aside to, like, share with your family and create those bonds. But so we have a cousins trip that we do every year, and we just started inviting Kyle because Kyle's our only male cousin. So he's like, why do I get left out? But the cousins trip started from our aunt. Like, she took us every year, and there was 3 rules. The only rule I remember is have fun. But we used to go to King's Dominion, and we went to Busch Gardens, and we created those memories. And so now as adults, you know, we've continued that to make time for each other, to make sure that we continue those relationships and share those bonds. So I think that this is maybe a good point to talk about how we've leveraged that bond and familial capital and taken it into and turned it into action. So Brittany, if you want to kind of start, or Kyle, if you want to start, just kind of talk about some of the things that have sprung from our family table in terms of like activism, community, and projects that we've worked on.
So one of the things, so while we were at the dinner table, there would be a lot of different discussions, but a lot of times, and I imagine this is true for many Black families, there were a lot of conversations around race, issues with race. We happened to, you know, the 3 of us, we happened to, we were afforded a certain level of privilege, right? Our parents were middle income, and so they also had in the back of their minds, or probably in the forefront of their minds, that they wanted to make sure that we understood the level of privilege that we were afforded. There was a saying that they constantly said was, to whom much is given, much is required. So being Black and being Black and being provided with opportunities that they weren't provided with, they made sure that we knew the responsibility that we had and the responsibility that they will almost call us to do. So to talk some activism, we can go down a whole list. So one of the things that we're working on right now, as Cal and Ashley mentioned, was the farmers market in Capitol Heights, which is actually right outside of the community where our family were slaves. From there, we also work with local community gardens, so Cottage City Community Garden. It's another community that has been deemed like a food desert, lacks significant access to a lot of things, low performance schools, but we've really been able to use food, again for us, because food is like very important. We've been able to use food as a leverage and an opportunity to build community. So in this yellow poster here, right here, this is actually a photo of one of our community events that we held. It was a garden talk and taste. And then this talk and taste, we were able to bring Prince George's County residents from across the area, people who spoke different languages together around food. And we had a chef make paella in the garden, and we talked about food access, food equity, food justice, what does that look like? We also work with a local community group, so this church that we're still a part of, that church that my grandmother was initially a part of, her father was a part of, and that now we're still a part of that congregation, working with senior citizens and youth to do environmental stewardship. So what does it look like to protect the land that is, for me, like my ancestral lands? So this is the land where my ancestors are from. What does it look like to protect this land, to preserve it, and to institute policies and to do some direct work on the land to preserve it? It also looks around political advocacy. So training people about land use planning and zoning, bringing them again together around food to talk about what is zoning, what is planning, how has this impacted our communities, how does it shape our communities today, how can we advocate for more just and more equitable development in our local area. So Kyle and Ashley, I didn't know if there were some things you all wanted to add.
Well, yeah, Kyle, I would like for you to kind of talk about your initiatives, and I think it's important, I would think it's important to have you on so many projects, because, you know, there aren't a lot of Black men that are urban gardeners, or, you know, and I think it's important for other youth, like when you're at the market and we're trying to get young Black boys to volunteer, you know, I think seeing you is really important. So having you in that space, I mean, it means a lot. So I would like you to kind of talk about some of the projects that you worked on and how you kind of earned your family capital.
Okay. So like Ashley and Brittany said, the farmers market is a big thing for me. And it actually kind of started from the dinner table, right? And in terms of going back home, saying, you know, I had just purchased my home. I'm like, we have the grocery store, since I've been in my home for about 4 years, and since I've been in there, the only grocery store literally for 8 miles, starting from, and that's within Washington, D.C., out to our county in Prince George's County, which is right outside. It's literally no grocery store. But I noticed my taxes went up since I've been in there. So I'm like, that's weird. Literally nothing else has happened here. My taxes are going up. And then the only grocery store for miles has closed. So, and just talking with Brittany and Ashley and leveraging their network and their resources, I was like, hey, won't we do a farmer's market here, right? We know black farmers, we know organizers, we know the community, we from here. Won't we just, instead of going to the Whole Foods or looking for Harris Teeter to come save us, won't we just try to save ourselves? We have the resources. And so what we did was we planned a market, and this is our second year in running the market. It's been super successful. And I look to like my cousins Ashley and Brittany for counsel all the time with certain things like this, and the market has been that in terms of talking about young black men being more involved and at the table. Part of, I guess, kinship is not necessarily just your blood, right, or the people you're necessarily related to. It could be friends, it could be neighbors, and in my community, I noticed that people kind of stayed in their different pockets, right? It's like everybody has their day-to-day struggles, and it's sometimes hard to see beyond those struggles. And my neighbor and I said, you know what? Let's be intentional about creating these connections amongst one another. And we did a block party. We knocked on everybody's door and said, hey, what can you bring? Can you make a donation? We're gonna be at this time. We're gonna be at this place at this time. Come out. And as a result, I know literally all my neighbors down my street. They know me. We have a group chat in case like something crazy happened. Everything good down there? Do I need to call the police? Do I need to know what's going? And we look out for each other. And I think a lot of those values and things that, these initiatives stem from our conversations at the table, talking to my dad, talking to my aunt, talking to my cousins, and being able to try to inspire, seeing how those values help shape who I am and trying to inspire those values in others. Because a lot of folks, whether you have a big family or small family, you get together, but there are a lot of people that feel like they have no family. And how can we recreate these tables so that we aren't just necessarily looking at it as just making sure my mom, brother, sister are there, but what about my neighbor? What about this young man here or this young woman here, and creating those bonds. And that's kind of.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to add, one of the other projects that Kyle worked on, he talked about, building these community spaces, is he helped launch this initiative called Mill on the Hill, where he actually brought together people from all different parts of our neighborhood together over dinner. And we would have different discussions. So maybe one weekend it might have been we talked about urban agriculture. Another month we might have talked about, what else did we talk about? Black history, and like the black history in the local community. So finding like new and innovative ways to bring people together over a dinner table, bring people together over food, but then while also preserving some of those histories and some of those stories that might have been lost to the community, while also building these new networks and these new relationships as well.
Yeah.
Forgot about that one.
No, thank you. And I like how Kyle kind of mentioned like bringing other people into the table, because I think that we all kind of have an opportunity to do that, right? So like family or kinship, like you guys kind of described, like it's not just about, okay, hey, this is my cousin, this is my, this is my uncle or whomever it is. It's like we have the opportunity to kind of, especially as black folks, like we call everybody auntie such and such or uncle such and such, like that's just how we are. We have that connection. And so how can we really use those connections to kind of propel us forward? But it was something that you mentioned that really made me think, a lot of times when people think about activism and they think about community service or nonprofits, they think of it in a sense that like, oh, okay, I want to do something, so I have to create a nonprofit. Or I want to make a difference, so it has to be some big thought out, or it has to be a conference, right? But like, it doesn't have to, it just, and I feel like at our dinner table, we were granted the boldness because of the privilege and the opportunities that our parents sacrificed. We had the boldness to say, well, I can go do out and be whatever I want to be. Or if I want to have a block party on my block, then that's what I'm gonna do, and I have the right, the right to do that. It gave us kind of that boldness. And like I was saying, like, community service doesn't have to be a big thing. So last year I turned 35, right? And so I just saw this idea on social media. Somebody had posted it. And it was something like, if you see a woman, one of the things that homeless women really struggle with is feminine products, feminine hygiene products. And I saw a post like, oh, you should fill a purse and give it to a homeless woman, fill it with feminine products and give it to a homeless woman because that's something that they lack. And so for my birthday, I just said, hey, for my birthday, I want to gain, I put it out on my social media pages and I said, hey, I want to fill 35 purses. And what I got in turn was hundreds of purses, hundreds of like donations, hundreds of dollars, like all sorts of stuff. And we might have a picture up there somewhere, but like, I think kind of like leveraging our kinship, leveraging our strengths and weaknesses, I've been able to learn, and what I would love to kind of share with other people is that it doesn't have to be big. All you have to do is like start it and take action and leverage what you have to make a difference, So, Britt.
So there's an article by Tara Yoso. It's called "Whose Culture Has Capital? A Critical Race Theory Discussion of Community Cultural Wealth." And so for us and for me, I think this article and some of the ways that the author describes community capital really resonates for us. And so one of the types of capital that they bring up is familial capital. And I'll read it directly. Familial capital refers to those cultural knowledges nurtured among family, kin, that carry a sense of community, history, memory, and cultural intuition. This form of cultural wealth engages a commitment to community well-being and expands the concept of family to include a more broad understanding of kinship. And in our communities, or in the communities in which I live, the communities where I know Kyle lives, and actually also, our community lacks financial wealth, right? So I can look at our community in comparison, so Prince George's County in comparison to Montgomery County, and read off all different types of inequities. But there are these other types of ways that we can start to view capital in our community in which we are so wealthy. And once we start to leverage those types of capital, we can really we have actually been able to create some very strong changes. And even when I go back and I look at something like the Rosenwald School, and even some initial benevolence lodges, some initial freedom schools really were leveraging this idea of familial capital and these other types of capitals that communities have.
Thank you. So I just wanted to give we wanted to give 4 steps that we feel like from our story, like pull out 4 steps that everybody can leverage with their own families. And so the first one is just start the conversation around food, right? I know, like Brittany mentioned, we had this event at the garden. We even at the garden, I don't know if anybody else is a part of a community garden, but at our garden we have like 30 beds. Everybody signed up because it's only $10 to rent a bed, right? But then when it gets into the middle of the summer, nobody comes and pulls their weeds. But I just said, I want to have a time to like have everybody come to the garden and not be about work, it's just about fun. So I started Wind Down Wednesdays. It's people in the garden I never even seen in the garden before, like Wind Down Wednesdays. People are like, ooh, yeah, let's come. And so first you got to get the people there, right? So let's start the conversations around food. And so the next one, if Kaya wants to take, is learn and teach, right? So this idea that when we were having the conversations at our table, it wasn't just, I couldn't just come and just talk about stuff and just say things off the top of my head, because there was going to be somebody to challenge that idea, right? And so I had to come correct when I came to the table. I had to know what I was talking about, or also I would be challenged and I would have to go back and say, well, is this something that I really believe in? Is this important? Why am I passionate about this subject? And I think that you mentioned something earlier in terms of like learn and teach.
Oh, that it was also so that the family table or dinner table for us was also this platform to learn, and just from learning through listening. So hearing some of the family stories. So people always ask me, well, Brittany, how can you remember this story? How do you understand this? And it was honestly because sometimes I would just sit and listen to my grandmother talk to my mother.
So learn, teach, and listen.
Yeah, okay,
Learn,
so
teach.
learn, teach, and listen. So we'll add that one in.
Yeah, I like that.
I like that.
Then the next one is leverage the strengths of your kinship court and identify roles each person can play. So this made me laugh when we talked about this because like Kyle, he evolved as like the natural leader of the capital market, right? And he initially, Brittany and I weren't working on the project with him, but some things were not going to the standard that he holds himself to, right? So he kind of brought in his bulldog to kind of like help to back him up, right? So like, and I think about like our strengths. Like I love to write. I'm good at writing. I can be really catchy or whatever the case is. But Brittany is very good at organizing. She's good at history. She's very good at graphics. So we kind of work together and we naturally kind of like identify what our roles are and kind of fell into them. So when we're working on a project, you know, I might write the words and Brittany does this part. And so it makes it easier and we're not reinventing the wheel every time. And then the last one, what was the last one, Brittany?
Oh, take action.
Take action and change the world.
Yeah, and so one of the things for us that really looks around forming some kind of consistency of a bonding experience. So even when I think about us growing up, so you know, my sister and my cousin had mentioned our dinner table wasn't just like the dinner table at our household, but it also looked like our parents making sure that every Thanksgiving, in addition to having a Thanksgiving meal, our job was to also go do some form of community service. So they almost ingrained in us, institutionalizing us or socialized us with this idea of
I like to call it a thought warriors. They made little thought warriors.
to making sure that we do service. Or when the film The Corner came out on HBO, our parents sitting us down together, watching The Corner, and not just watching the film, but also having a digest and a dialogue about what we saw and the conditions. And then, I think a lot of this really just goes to our parents and our family and the elders in our family, not just having a dialogue and a discussion, but then also making us link that back to other conditions that we see in our community. And that then allowed us to better be able to articulate and understand, I won't say us, for me, it allowed me to better articulate and understand. So right now I'm doing a PhD program in urban planning at the University of Maryland. And I joke and I tell my dad, like, everything that you're telling me about, that you've taught me, from reading Bloods about Vietnam War veterans, from reading The Spook Who Sat by the Door, The Murder in Memphis, They Came Before, all these books, all these things that you've taught us, from going to do an archaeology program at the Smithsonian that was free, that my mother somehow found out about, that has prepared me for my PhD program. And I'm like, your name just needs to be on this degree, not mine, because you already gave me all the information.
Right.
So I think definitely the idea of establishing some form of consistent thing, and it could be once a year, you can do it every week, whatever regular circumstance or regular time of event it is for you to do it. But I think that's been something that has been able to bond us together and to allow us to see each other as a team who's working together to create something for the future.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I think that is the end. If you guys had any questions for us or any feedback, we'd love to hear. Like I said, you all are part of our dinner table, so.
You all are family now.
Absolutely.
Hey, cousin.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just want to say I appreciate this panel because oftentimes I think we are looking for someone to provide a solution to us versus being the solution or creating a solution for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so I respect and appreciate the fact that you all have really taken some intentional efforts to make impact and change our world. That's needed, and so kudos to you. The second thing I'll add is that I am always, like, one of my mantras is like, we can change the world, like we can make a difference, we can make impact, but I'm always trying to really think about what can I do as one person to make impact. But again, your comments were inspiring in that it doesn't have to be some big thing, right? You can get the conversation going, start small, and then at the end of the day, just take some action.
Yeah.
And so, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And
Thank you.
there's a really good model that looks at spatial, I forget the last term, but it's like the spatial, I guess, sphere of influence almost. And you can start, I mean, you'll have an individual, then you have a family, then from the family or so, individual or household, then from the household you might go to a block, then from a block you go to a neighborhood, then from a neighborhood you go to a city or a county, then from the city or a county you go to a state and then the country. And so as a planner, like that's the sphere of influence. And you know, through school I'm realizing that this family that I have has really been the center of our community. And when we're able to figure out these different links and connections, like you said, we really can take action. And you know, like Cal is my secret weapon in my planning meetings, in my planning and zoning meetings. People don't know he's my cousin, but I talk to him about urban planning issues. He understands the game, so I can teach him like, all right, when you go to this meeting, this is how you need to advocate for this, or these are the things you need to request.
Yeah.
So.
And go ahead.
Can you tell a little bit how you started the community garden,
Oh, so the garden or the market? So
the market?
okay, so Brittany and Ashley work in the Carter City garden, and so Brittany connected me, and Brittany's kind of always been in it's like this black farmers collective in DC, and it's really been picking up a lot of steam over the last couple of years, and Brittany's kind of pulled me into it, and so as a result, I met a group in my community called the Food Justice Coalition of 20743, and organizing with them as a direct result of the Safeway in our community closing, leaving people not only in Prince George's County but in Washington D.C. Ward 7 without adequate access to fruits and vegetables. We decided we don't need anybody to come save us. We had the network, we had the people, and we had the will to start a market. And literally, kind of how Ashley said, things don't need to start off big. You know, when I first started, you know, you go to other markets and other communities, and you see all these different vendors and all this nice people out and all this good stuff, right? And that's kind of the expectation I had when we wanted to start that. It was going to be a whole bunch of vendors, everybody was going to support it, because who doesn't want fruits and vegetables, right? Mm-hmm. And that wasn't necessarily the reality for us. Mm-hmm. And what I had to learn from, you know, talking to Ashley is just that, you know, sometimes what you can do is good enough, right? And so our market may have started off with one vendor, and us just having to provide fruits and vegetables and coordinating with the people that were able. But as we were showing a passion and consistency, we were able to build really a huge, not a huge market now, but we will be huge one day. And I mean, we're up to almost 7-8 vendors a market, and so it literally is a grassroots market. I couldn't have done it without my cousins, my kin, and I'm excited to see what it would turn into, because literally, it's the spark went off in my head that everybody complains about us not having a grocery store, but we can literally build one ourselves.
Yeah.
And so.
Where did you get the plot of land?
Oh, the plot of, so and so this is kind of where Brittany kind of working in government, trying to teach me how to navigate. So we had to present. So the market is on land owned by the town of Capitol Heights. And so we had to prepare a proposal to present to the council, to the town, and it was an interesting experience. Like I said, who doesn't want fruits and vegetables, fresh fruits and vegetables? Right. But I'm learning politics is real, and my old supervisor, who I considered a mentor, said this to me in this stuff. You don't have to play the politics, but it's suicide not to recognize them. And that's the truest statement ever, because I went in there thinking, hey, we don't have your constituents don't have any access to food. How can we change this? We're willing to do a farmer's market, and just being able to learn how to navigate politics. Yeah. So essentially, we were able to get the approval from the council and get an MOU get an MOU established, and from there we just went out into the community, Brittany had a network of farmers in the area, and we just pulled together our network. We had multiple dinner sessions at the table where we're talking about these things, whether it be at my house, Brittany's house, Ashley's house, on a conference call, or at a town hall. But we literally organized this market over dinner, and I think I can't stress that. Literally, whatever challenges you have in your community and your family, start with dinner. And go from there, and going back to the 4 points of it all, have the conversation over food. What's two?
Learn and teach.
Learn and teach.
And
be
listen.
open. Learn, teach, and listen. What's the third one?
Leverage.
Leverage your network, and then go out and take action. This is not rocket science, but it does take a little grit.
Right.
And I'm just thankful for my mentors and my family, and go out and change the world.
Thank you. Thank you guys for being a part of it. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. We have one more.
No, I was just gonna say, it's a great conversation. I'm doing a talk next week about a portion of my family migrated from North Carolina to Massachusetts. And so you just helped me to sort of ask a few more deeper questions I need to ask. Well, when the relatives got to New England over 100-some years, whether or not they hold these dinners, whether or not they have these gatherings, meetings, because they all tended to move and live around each other when they migrated away. And so, thank you. Just help me out a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So we both went, Ashley and I both went to A&T.
He wants to
And
be
he went to
at.
Winston-Salem. So once we all left home and went to college, we also all went to college.
Would they all
Same.
follow me?
Okay.
Oh, put Kyrie in the middle.
Okay.
Trying to get rid of the exit sign. Got it.
Thank you.
There's a glare, so the connecting kin isn't clear on the picture. Oh, that'll be, let's try it. Yeah,